Okay, sorry about the break between the videos. If I remember right, we left off here at the view that was called auction bid details, and it was a shared view that could be used by other views so that I could show an auction with its bid, with its multiple bids. So here I show its different things. I already talked about the description, and then this shows the end date, and it formats the end date. And I show bids down here, or the bid information down here, and you can go through the different logic. Often, like this will show the little button that I have there. I want to show, oh here, there's another razor action that I use often, and it's to make a link, and I can give it a certain class if I want, and I can tell it to have some information in the background that when they click, it already knows, say, the auction ID, so that it's passed into the controller. And in this case, the controller is the bid controller, and it's a view accepted profile. So this is when they can actually contact the person after their bid has been accepted. So that's the basic thing of views, and you can look at my other views if you want. Obviously, I have ones that are specific to the accounts, auctions, bids, and the home, and then I have my sidebar views here too, like if you're a company or regular, or if you're not logged in, or if you're just a regular user. So that's basically the model view controller main components, and I'll show you some extra stuff that I have now. So just going from the top, we've already talked about abstract, but in app start here, if I go into root config, here I've made some roots to make it so that when somebody hits the bid controller with the edit and they just give a number after it, they don't have to give a query parameter, they can just give a number, it goes to the action edit in the bid controller, and this makes sure that the auction ID that is passed in is this auction ID right here. And this happens the same as with if they hit the auction controller in the edit method for an auction. They can edit right there, and the auction ID is passed in. That would be at the end of the URL there, just like that, to the method that's in the controller. So that's some stuff that I did as far as modifying roots to make them at least more readable. And what this does also is when the information is sent back, it also sends it back in this format. So when bid number or auction number 7 is passed back, it does auction/edit/7, giving it back to the user like that. So that's information there that I used. We already talked about concrete content. I have my specific CSS in this CSS folder here, and I mostly added my own content. I used what's called Flat UI as a framework, and my own content in here is, first of all, my media queries. Let's start here. I have a description of here of what I did if you forget this, but I have my media queries to decide if it's over 601 pixels, or then it displays all this, and I just have it in one large document. And at the bottom of this one, if I scroll down to about there, that's where it stops, I have a comment right here that says below this line is what I added. I added some other stuff, but I don't know all of what I added because it's just modifying the existing framework. But here's the CSS that you can see that I edited. I guess I forgot to just display this one correctly, but it's super easy to just display it really easy. And you can look at those and see what those mean, my CSS rules that I did. But that was just to modify the framework, the flat UI framework that I had. And then below it is if it was below 600 pixels, then I had it look a little different on the page. And again, my edits are here at the bottom that you can see. Now I'll show you a quick example of that in, wrong one, in my web page. If I get below 600 pixels, it changes to a more user-friendly view for a cell phone. You can even look at this with your cell phone, and it actually looks pretty nice. But it comes on like that, it loads the auction. There's my GIF there for loading. There we go. It took a little longer, I guess. It wasn't cached probably. But it looks actually really nice on a cell phone, so you can look at that and mess around with it if you want. You can even make an account. But it looks very nice on a smartphone. Anyways, so I'm done with that for now. And those were my edits to the CSS, as well as I made a GIF, which is probably in the images here. AjaxLoader.gif, that's the one that I made that you just saw that's loading. So those were my additions. I didn't make too many because I liked the framework that I used. Now, as well, I also modified some of the scripts. Application.js and a bunch of all of this here came with the framework, but in application.js, my additions are at the very bottom of this. Mostly it's just a couple live things right here that make it so when I click on them, here we go, .live, when I click on them it executes the method and gives the right ID and passes it in, and then I call and return a partial view, and then I substitute it doing the .html and give it the data that was returned, which is a partial view. You can look through that if you want. This right here is trying to allocate my sidebar height, and we talked about that, and it didn't work, so I'll have to implement what you told me to do, which I think will work a lot better. So going down this, we've talked about content controllers, the entities. We haven't talked about the filters, and I will show you in here first my auction API, because this relates most to the filters. I made an API controller as well for my auctions. And what I mean by this is I have this basic authorization filter because a simple membership doesn't work as nicely with the API controllers. The basic authorization filter is my own filter that I created that's in filters here. If I go to basic authorization, what I do is anytime that I hit the API auction controller, it has to go through this filter first and execute this code. And what it does is it grabs the basic authentication context out of it, and I log the user in when I perform this basic authentication stuff. It gets the authorization basic stuff from here, the authorization parameter, and then I perform the authorization here. And here I do the encoding and whatnot to convert it, and then I split it for the username and password, and then I log in the person. And if they do log in, then I set the current principal here in order to make sure that I still have their information. So this is my own thing to make sure that when they use the API, I can know if they're logged in or not. So here I implement my repository so they're there, but then it hits and it just has the basic get and post and put and delete at the bottom here. And because it doesn't work as well with the simple membership, I just can't get the current ID, so I have to actually call the web security and get user ID using their name. And they only get this far if they can actually get in through the filter. So this is my auction API controller that I created. I haven't gotten to the rest of the API controllers, but this will make it so I can develop on any apps, or anyone could really use this if they wanted to implement it in their site. So that shows my use of filters as well as my API controller. If I go on, I have an HTML helper that just helps with paging, and then there are images that are used, and I talked about my infrastructure with an inject controller. The models, this is old, I can get rid of this. And I talked about scripts and view models and views. So that's everything for the basic project, but however I did a lot of testing with this. I have my database project down here that you can look at on your own time. But I'll start with my API test. In my API test class, let me minimize this top part here. I have, I guess, an infrastructure or framework that I decided to use that I implemented here myself. And basically I have my tests in here organized like this with the deletes, gets, posts, and puts. And I have the base, which has the base test class. Anyways, I'll show you, but once I get in here, I'll show you some of the tests that I did for the API tests, and I have config that I do. You can look through a lot of this. I think I'll let you have the time because it's a fairly complex framework that I use to make it actually very simple and extensible to build a lot of API tests. Now I'll execute these API tests here. It has a test category auction tests, which are right here. These are the two that are mostly implemented, and they're in the config. If you look at it, it's pointed at the actual site that's live right now. And if I run them, it will tell me if they passed or failed. and you can look at each one if you want, going in there and seeing what it actually does. But it does its asserts, sets it up, executes, and then asserts to make sure. And you can look at those. So that's that, and I also did a load test here. Don't execute this too many times if you do. If I created this load test to implement both of those tests, but several times to test load. I say not to do this a lot because I'm still on a Azure right now as a test, and I don't think they allow me to do tons of processor time. But if I run this load test that I created, it goes through several iterations and up to 25 users in a step-by-step thing. Just demonstrating how I've used load tests to make sure that in the future the server, my server and the database that I use and the code is performing really well. Oh, it ran into an error, I guess it looks like. Let's try that one more time. It's in progress. Oh, okay. I'm not sure what happened that first time. Here it is, though. I told it to just go through 200 iterations, and it went through that fast, because it's pretty quick, and it went up to 25 users. And this gives me my basic information that I can use, which is usually I use the average test time, and then up here shows me how long the longest tests here were, basically, in different settings. I do this quite a bit at work, which is how I know a lot of this, but I applied it to this application, this framework, to do that. Now beyond that, I also did unit tests. So far it's just very simple, just to show that I could do them. I did a lot more in the sports store that I did, but these are a couple simple ones like can paginate and can generate page links, and if I run those tests, they are right up here. Can paginate and generate page links, and if I run those, they'll just go pretty quick, but you can look at them here and see what they actually do. And then I also implemented UI tests with a, let's see, right here. Here are my UI tests. I haven't set up the framework yet, but I did implement a couple tests. I did use a framework called Automation Testing Framework that makes it really simple to make controls that I can then click on and identify those by XPath or ID or class or different things. And I set it up so I'll just show you what it does. I only created 2 tests so far because of the time that I had to do everything, but when I run these tests, I have it automatically open Chrome and do whatever I told it to do in the test. In this case, sign in as a company user, sign in as a regular user. This one, signing in as a company. This is all just automated, I'm not doing anything. And it does its own asserts and different things. And then it's going to sign in as a regular user. So I set it up with some UI testing as well as the API testing as well as the unit test to cover all of the areas. MVC, ASP.NET MVC4 makes it really easy to do test-driven development. And although I haven't done as much test-driven, I have done basically QA work afterwards to make sure that everything is still working, and if I change the code, I can run those tests just as smoke tests to make sure that everything is still happening. Now on top of this, I did make this, upload this basically using Team Foundation server. So when I go here and I go to pending changes, oh, I'm offline right now, but if I log on to my project, first auction here, it's going to make me sign in. But then I can go to my pending changes, and it keeps control of my check-ins so that I can reverse back to anything, and I can also share this with lots of people. But these are the included check-ins, and so if I check in now, which I might as well, I guess, currently. If I check in those 12 items, I'm pretty sure everything is working just fine. Checks them all in. I didn't give it a comment. It tells me it was successful, and other people can now get that code too and make their check-ins and everything. Also, as far as publishing the site, it's as simple as right-clicking on my thing and publish it, and my publishing context is already in there, and I can publish the site just like that. And it goes on, and any changes that I made are now live on my site that I showed you. So that's everything that I can think of as far as what I did. I feel like I've made the